Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece, and today we are here with some of your predictions for Chapter 1000 of the series, which is now confirmed to be the very first chapter that will be released in 2021, which thankfully is very soon. But I've made a video going over the legacy of landmark chapters and the patterns we can draw for them, as well as my positive thoughts for potential events. So now it's time to see what the Grand Fleet is predicting for this monumental occasion, starting with Law, looking for the road poneglyph, will stumble upon Kaido's subscription to the Grand Line Review, and upon touching it receives regular One Piece content straight into his YouTube feed. And I think that this is one we can all get on board with. I mean, if even Kaido has pressed the subscribe button, then you have very little excuse, dear viewer. So please do say hi in the comments below if you're a new member of the Grand Fleet, and I welcome you. Also, this video is sponsored by Normal Brands with a Z, and here you can acquire expressive hoodies, sweaters, and even electronics with positive, inspiring messages to go out and tackle the world. They have a range of gear for men, women, and children, and are currently having a buy one get one 50% option available. Sounds pretty solid, as does their tagline, which is Normal Brands, be you. That's more than enough. Very uplifting, I like it. So do check them out, link in the description. But now let's get started with some predictions for Chapter 1000, beginning with cut to the reverie with an Emu Dragon reveal. So this is one of the very standard thoughts I saw in these comments, the idea that we'll have a break and get to explore the outside world for a bit, which I think only works if Act 3 ends in Chapter 999, or I guess at the beginning or halfway through 1000 itself, but the latter one seems a bit weird. One thing I really do want to stress though is that the reverie is over. It's done. The event is finished and there will be no cutting back to it unless there's a flashback. I mean, we could head to Marijois or wherever the Revolutionary Army are, but there will be no more reverie. It's also a tricky thing because as much as what I probably crave most is one of those world catch-up chapters, Oda's precedent with landmark events seems to incorporate something great into the current location. So if massive things do happen and Act 3 still isn't over, then it's almost certainly going to be on Wano. Which, speaking of, revealing Zoro's parents and maybe the backstory of Kaido. So not so sold on the Zoro one, but the beginning of a hint of a Kaido flashback would certainly be greatly appreciated from me. It would also be kind of cool, just forgetting the 1000 number for a second, but it might be fun to end Act 3 of Wano with a flashback and give it a bookend kind of vibe. You know, starts with a flashback, finishes with a flashback, but I'm still not so sure about that. My prediction is that it ends with the line, end of prologue. That would be simultaneously the greatest yet most depressing thing I've ever seen. On the one hand, it would be quite comforting to know that One Piece is going to endure throughout the rest of my lifetime. Then again, on the other, it would be pretty sad knowing that I'd never get to see how it ends. Which, just as a side note, how lucky are all of we, having been born into this small sliver of the human timeline that just so happens to contain the telling of the greatest manga ever written. And this is going to make me sound like an old man, as most things do, but future generations just won't be able to appreciate One Piece like we do. They'll probably just blast through it and go, yeah, that was cool. But yeah, we are very lucky. Unlike perhaps Kinemon, who is just gonna die as Luffy arrives to the roof. Now this one I personally quite like because it matches up with what's happening on Wano. The end of Act 3 of a Kabuki play is generally crowned by tragedy, the darkest moment of the story, and of all of the people Oda could kill, Kinemon has been making me incredibly nervous for quite some time now. And that's because I've grown to really like him. Oda has done a brilliant job evolving the perverted fart samurai into a really sympathetic and respectable guy, which is why killing him would probably have the most impact of anyone right now. The death of Nefertari Vivi. Alright, keeping things up on the death train, this would certainly be unexpected to say the least. I mean, just imagine that. We get to Chapter 1000 and it's all like, hooray, we made it this far, and to celebrate, we're going to kill Vivi. Brutal, very brutal. Even worse than Kinemon as well, because Vivi would have been killed and the Straw Hats wouldn't have any idea that it happened. It would be a double tragedy because eventually they'd find out and we'd have to do the heartbreak thing all over again. I have extreme doubts to say the least though, because in the very rare chance that something like this does happen, I think that Oda would leave us on a cliffhanger rather than confirming what did or did not happen to Vivi, or indeed anyone else currently not on Wano. The chapter will be super boring. The most unexpected thing. Yes, this is indeed a possibility. It seems unthinkable, but another of the trends I discovered in going through the landmark chapters is that a lot of them are just business as usual One Piece. In many cases, Oda just continued telling his story rather than trying to work some sort of special celebration or huge event into it. And while it is really hard to see that happening with something like 1000 because it's just so big, at the same time, there's certainly not a 0% chance that it's just a normal chapter. The long-awaited return of Wanzi, the noodle chef. And sure, why not? I think it's just as reasonable as most other character revelations suggested for Chapter 1000. There's so many dreams of Scopper, Gaban, Vegapunk, Joy Boy, perhaps even Eam, but so few people ever mention poor Wanzi. I mean, the last time we saw him was entirely non-canon, although it was in Film Gold where he proposed to his girlfriend, now fiancée, I assume, perhaps even wife. So good on him. Makes it unlikely that he'd want to get involved in a skirmish with 2 of the 4 emperors, although just imagine a Sanji-Wanzi team-up. He is Sanji's ultimate combat partner, a chef fighting alongside food. It's absolutely beautiful. I predict that Luffy will awaken his devil fruit in chapter 1000 and calling it Gear 5th. Intriguing. I mean, it seems like a bit much to maybe both awaken and create a new gear all at once, but I do get where you're coming from. In fact, I have a video about the ever speculative topic of Gear 5th coming up, so I will save a lot of what I have to say for that. But what I will say right now is that I don't feel like Wano is the arc for awakening devil fruits. It seems very Haki-centric, and it would be quite fitting if Kaido were taken down at least part due to the advanced armament Haki, because that brings Odin's legacy into things as well. Due to that, being his trademark thing. As for Gear 5th though, I mean, at the time of this recording, we're 3 chapters away from hitting 1000. We have 998, 999, and then bam, 1000. And it just doesn't seem like enough time for Luffy to do his standard thing. Engage with the antagonist, and then after some brutal skirmishes, whip out a new technique. So if Gear 5th or even a new Gear 4th form were to happen, I think we're looking at Act 4, and even then, it might not happen. Nami's dress falls off by mistake, and Kaido dies of nosebleed along with his other Nakama. And really, I would love to see this happen, if only for the fan base reaction. People would lose their minds calling Kaido a joke of a Yonko, although in this case, to be fair, they'd probably be right. I really don't think that Kaido is 100% immune from appreciating the odd bit of nudity though. He's a fairly serious combat-driven guy, but he certainly has desires outside of that as well. But you know who I can imagine this sort of thing happening to? Queen. He is the exact right character for a naked lady gag to land. It obviously wouldn't kill him, but just imagine if it did. If Nami was the Straw Hat responsible for ultimately defeating Queen, the power scalars would implode. So it's a shame it's not going to happen. My personal prediction is that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet gonna make an appearance. This is interesting because I really don't see too much of that thought happening these days, which I do find fascinating because when we started Wano, the Grand Fleet rescue was a leading theory. The idea that there was no way that Luffy and the samurai can handle Kaido, and this was before Big Mom and her crew presented themselves as well. But it was that idea that Luffy would need an incredible mass of help from either the Grand Fleet or the remnants of the Whitebeard pirates, neither of which has really come to fruition. I mean, we do have Marco and Izo, but that seems to be what we've got to work with, and somehow we need to use what we have here to take down 2 Emperors of the Sea with simply what remains of the Ninja Pirate Mink Samurai Alliance. We should be good though. The raid is still going to end in success, which, speaking of, the Onigashima raid will end in failure. Mr. Morsh will do 3 mortal backwards flips. What? And the community will blow up. So I can confirm if the first part of the sentence were true, then the second and third parts would almost certainly come to fruition. I definitely fall in the opposing faction though. The raid will end in success, is my belief anyway. I think that Mr. Morsh is very good at analyzing One Piece fact patterns, like on a level that I am truly envious of, but sometimes the way he applies those patterns to the future is, well, it's interesting. Like for example, he was bang on about the pattern of the citizens of whatever island needing to see Luffy defeat the big bad guy. That is incredibly important because that's how the legend of Luffy spreads and how he makes grand alliances in the world. But we don't necessarily need to jump to a conclusion like the raid will fail for that to have happened. I mean, I've always thought it would be something as simple like a big TV screen gets set up in the flower capital, a la Marineford, but hey, Kaido has come up with something far more creative than I could ever dream of, and he's going to some pretty great lengths to make sure that each and every person sees his defeat. 1000. Oda flips 1000 to 001 and starts One Piece from scratch. Alright, so having gone through all of that, this is the one scenario where, yes, I can see the raid failing. Basically, here's what happens. Everyone dies and Luffy is forced to go back in time, right to the end of chapter 1 and relive his journey, knowing that he has to prepare harder for Kaido. And then after another roughly 23 years of publishing, we'll get back to the same point, which will technically be chapter 2000. Meanwhile, we have another bold prediction here with, it will contain at least one One Piece character, which I do think is a pretty safe conclusion to come though, because here's the thing. Even if chapter 1000 contained exclusively new characters, those new characters would still automatically become One Piece characters. Twice as long of a normal chapter length. I've seen this floating around a bit as well, and it would be nice and celebratory, but Weekly Shonen Jump really doesn't do that sort of thing. Outside of debut chapters, that is, because those things need 40 to 50 pages to stand out and tell a more complete story. But any hopes of a longer chapter in any other circumstance, well, they're pretty not great. Dragon pops up in front of Luffy and reveals the Revolutionary Army is is there too. Alright, I think I've spoken a fair bit about the whole Revolutionary Army on Wano thing. So this time I'll pose another question. Why would anyone want the Revolutionary Army to show up? Because let's say it happens. Let's say the Dragon, the Commanders, even K.O.L, and maybe even Sabo just rock up to Wano because of vague reasons related to weapons. And then everyone bands together to defeat Kaido, but doesn't that kind of undercut everything we've been building towards in this arc? Such a key factor of Wano has been about the Kozuki legacy coming together 20 years later. Almost everything plays into that. The vassals for obvious reasons, but also Luffy because of his link with Roger and Joy Boy. The Mink tribe have a direct loyalty to the Kozuki family. Mako and Izo are only there because of their direct connection to Odin, and everyone else, meaning like Law, Kid, Killer Drake, etc., they're effectively there because of a connection to Kaido. Meanwhile, not one person in the Revolutionary Army plays into the building up of this sort of legacy. So having them come in to save the day or just even the odds is completely off theme. Their target is the world government, so that's where their story is better played out, when they have some, actual dramatic weight to throw around. So instead, how about Chapter 1000 will just be Kaido helping Big Mom have another baby. All 22 pages. And yeah, I did notice that you've added an extra 4 pages onto the standard chapter length with this disturbing prediction here, but you know what? At least it's celebrating life, unlike everyone else calling for the deaths of Kinemon and Vivi and the like. So sure, why not? Chapter 1000. I can picture it now. Luffy reaches the roof and catches Big Mom and Kaido banging. Perfect. But what do you guys think? Please do leave your thoughts in the comments below or even join my Discord server. And if you're keen for some more videos like this, then please do go and check out some of my other content or even subscribe to the channel for more glorious One Piece business uploaded straight into your YouTube feeds. But for now, this has been the Grand Line Review, and I'll see you next time.